6:15. Speaking of business people, while COVID hit the Brexit future trade talks yesterday, deal or no deal, there is a lot for businesses to prepare for on the 1st of January. Katie Prescott has this morning's business news. Morning, Katie.
Good morning, Michelle. Yes, it's a really busy time for all businesses preparing for new Brexit rules, especially for those crossing the border into the EU. We'll be hearing from one haulier about what he makes of the new systems for transporting goods, which come into place at the end of the year. Also in business this morning, we'll be speaking to George Godber from Polar Capital about what's going on in the markets and hearing how employers are being asked to prevent rising cases of domestic violence. But first, whatever the outcome of the Brexit talks, at the end of the transition period on the 1st of January, trucks will need a permit to enter Kent, known as the Kent Access Permit, or more catchily titled, Check and HGV is ready to cross the border. It's effectively a checklist confirming drivers have all the documents they need to clear customs to prevent queuing at the border. But with just over a month to go until that comes in, some hauliers are worried that the system hasn't been tested. Jon Swallow is a director at the 22-year-old company Jordon, which transports all sorts of goods between Europe and the UK. And he shared his view with me.
We've had sight of the information and the proposal for the system, and so they use our feedback to when they eventually go live with it. The system's not finalised yet. They're taking feedback from companies like ours on whether it's working or not.
What do you make of the system as it's been presented to you so far?
It's just another layer that people are going to have to deal with. We've already got the GVMS system, Goods Vehicle Movement System, and we don't think it's necessary. We feel this is just a symptom of a lack of readiness. We've been advising about these queues for years. It's quite obvious if you're going to have a hard border, then that's what's going to happen. And now we're getting closer and closer, building lorry parks, introducing systems like this. But to be honest, I don't really see how it's going to help. It just moves the problem to another county.
What are you most concerned about as we come up to the end of the transition period on the 1st of January?
I'm most concerned that we haven't been able to trial these systems and that there's no implementation phase. I mean, that is crucial. If you're going to have a deal, which we still don't know, then you need an implementation phase. If we're going to go no deal, then we should have some breathing space to trial some of these systems, because I can't see how they're possibly going to work as it is.
And are you more concerned about things coming into the country or going out?
Transport, European transport, is like a circular movement. So if your goods come into the country and then the driver unloads and he loads up, then he has to leave the country. And if you've got a problem leaving the country, you're not going to get your goods coming back in. And I think during January, you're going to have two different scenarios possible. Either very, very long queues, or no one's going to come here and your shelves will be bare. And that's the only two options there are.
What are your clients saying to you about that, about the end of the transition period?
We are really, really being very honest with them. You know, we've done all we can. We're very, very prepared. But what we can't help them with is getting their goods into the country and out of the country in the timeframes that they're used to. So we're having to manage expectations now, and they're shifting a lot of their stuff into the country right now, and probably in January they'll have stocked up.
You've been in the industry a long time. Do you see this as something that will iron itself out as people get used to the new systems?
Sure. Yeah. I think on an optimistic note, we'll adapt to this. We always do as an industry as well. This is what we do. But I think you have to understand we had it as good as it gets, and we shouldn't forget that.
Have you been given a sense of when the systems will be in place?
11 o'clock on the 31st of the 12th this year. But that's literally, and they're saying that's the go live date. So we haven't had a chance to use it and don't know what it looks like. We just have a document now. And that document has only been out in the wild for 2 days. So we can't train or trial it in the real world. We can just look at the document and just imagine how it's going to be.
Do you think it'll be okay when you're imagining it?
No, never. Never. And I'm an optimistic person. I really am, and I really want things to work. And that's probably what frustrates me more than anything, that it needn't have been like this. We have had so much time to get it right. And yet still, we've left it to the last minute and no one's been able to give feedback, real world feedback. That's what I mean. Not feedback from a document. Actually trial it and feed it back. And I don't mean trial it just one or two companies. I mean, get small parts of it introduced over time before we have the whole system in place.
That was Jon Swallow of Jordon Freight. Well, a Department for Transport spokesperson told us that there are clear plans in place to mitigate any disruption at the end of the transition period, including a multi-million-pound information campaign for hauliers and 45 information and advice sites across the UK to ensure that they've everything they need to prepare. They also said the Kent Access Permit is a sensible part of these plans and will help ensure that hauliers who have got the correct customs documentation can verify this and move smoothly through our trading ports. Well, let's pick up on those Brexit talks with someone who's watching them very closely, George Godber, fund manager at Polar Capital. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
We've just heard the view from the front line there, but if we look at the bigger picture, if a deal is done in the next couple of weeks, despite the current coronavirus hiatus that we're seeing, do you think we are going to see a big market impact from that? I mean, perhaps even similar to the bounce that the vaccine news gave us last week.
In short, yes, because I think if you take a step back, since 2016, the UK has underperformed the rest of the world equity market by about 35%, and it's been very derated and looks very cheap. Even year to date, FTSE 100 is down 16, European markets are down 8, and we can blame that partly on Corona, but we've all had Corona. The bigger picture is Brexit, and the rest of the world is desperate to invest in the UK, and they are affecting the chaos and the uncertainty that might happen if it's not sorted. So I would expect a very material move in the currency markets, maybe sterling to move from 132 to about 140, and domestic stocks and financials particularly to do well.
And which particular stocks do you think would benefit?
Well, financials particularly, because obviously that represents such a big part of the UK economy. Many of the domestic companies will, would see a re-rating. So anything that's based, 100% here. So that would therefore mean that the FTSE 250, which tends to be more domestic, would do better than the FTSE 100. But not all areas of the market would do well. If you looked at something like the oil stocks that earn their money in dollars, a deal would mean that obviously that dollar would, be relatively weaker versus sterling, and they wouldn't, participate.
Now, I mentioned the vaccine bounce, the extraordinary bounce that we saw last week, and it really did completely reverse the trends that we had been seeing in markets, didn't it? I mean, all of the companies that have been doing well, tech stocks, pharma stocks, what someone called stay-at-home stocks, seemed to go down, and the less loved ones that had suffered during the virus did so much better.
You're exactly right. I mean, certain bits of the market have done incredibly well. You just have to look at the NASDAQ, at things like Zoom and Peloton. These are the sort of the stay-at-home stocks, as you quite rightly call them, and they've done brilliantly. And the valuations has become very, very, very elevated. The vaccine gives us an exit route. We all hope. Let's hope they can get it logistically out properly. And that has meant that markets which tend to look forward are looking out at other areas of the market, like pubs, leisure stocks, that might actually have a better time in 6 months' time. And those are on very low valuations at the moment. And that's what's behind this rotation we're seeing. And
do you think that will continue even if we do get a lockdown that extends over Christmas and beyond?
As markets tend to look forward, and I think it's about the direction of travel, and it's where we're going to be by next spring, early summer. So what could hamper that is, I think, if we're making a Horlicks of the logistics around distributing a vaccine, and if there's any problems on that side of it, the exit strategy, if you like, then that would definitely cause a problem.
Thank you very much, George Godber from Polar Capital. Let's hope we're not making a Horlicks of that.